Farmers in Africa are important to the economy, but also very exposed to climate change. Regenerative agriculture is farming practices that bring back destroyed soil in a way that makes soil healthy and productive, restores biodiversity, and improves nutrition. That's the future. There are 2 innovative farms in Kenya practicing regenerative agriculture. We have Tamaru using agroforestry and Farmer Max using livestock to regenerate soils.
The story about this farm is not just about chickens. It's about using chickens as a tool to regenerate soil. It was typical to any small farm. It was heavily grazed, it was tilled. We got in 100 chicks and it kind of evolved from that. Over many, many years, the ground was being used in conventional way of farming, which means that over time you have a loss in the microorganisms by tilling it. You're releasing carbon, which is food for the microorganisms. What we're trying to do is stop any disturbance in the soil and try and revitalize it by using livestock to fertilize the soil in a natural way. Conventional poultry farming is usually in confined houses where there's a batch of 3,000–4,000 chickens. Whereas what we do is we take away that pressure by shifting the coops. On the broiler pasture, we have a small dairy herd that we move about 10 days in front of the chickens, and they graze the grass down to about 6 inches. The patties are full of natural protein by the time the chickens graze over them, so it further substitutes their feed in terms of natural protein that they are able to forage and peck at on the ground. What they poop out is our resource for the soil. Their poop is high in nitrogen. They are fertilizing the soil. We are trying to rebuild ecosystem health, and it's effective. And then behind the chickens are the sheep that come in, who also maintain a sort of level of pasture where we want it for the broilers. In other poultry operations, the poop is a burden, whereas for us, it's a tool to regenerate soil. Our system of farming is nature enhancing. If you had a bird's eye view of our farm, you would see exactly where the chickens' coops have been. And the idea is that if your soils are healthy, your pasture is healthy, your animals are healthy, we're healthy, and the planet is healthy.
Agroforestry is the practice of either agriculture in forestry systems or forestry in agricultural systems, so that trees and crops are on the same piece of land for long periods of time. Farmers are able to produce diverse portfolios of food, allowing them to make more income rather than when they are relying on just one crop or one enterprise.
What we're standing in here are actually tunnels that used to grow flowers, and only 2 years ago it was just bush. Lots of weeds, very overgrown, and not much life. It's just amazing that you can bring that all back within less than 2 years. We decided to set up agroforestry because we wanted a food production system that produces superior quality, enhances soil and sequesters as much carbon as possible, and enhances, of course, biodiversity. It was really when we first went to Brazil and discovered the advantages of syntropic agroforestry over any other agroforestry. We realized a lot of the crops that they were using in Brazil are also in Africa, and so we knew we could do it here and just slightly change it ever so slightly just to fit into the local context. So if you can imagine, in a natural forest you've got lots of different levels. So you've got your canopy crops, you've got your emergent above that, you've got your sub-canopy, and then you've got your ground level stuff. In some circumstances you've even got stuff growing under the ground, and that's what we're strongly mimicking in a system like this. In syntropic agroforestry, everything is planted at the same time, be it from seed or from seedling.
You start planting trees and other crops that begin to grow slowly and helping each other. Fast growers begin to diversify the system and produce food at the onset of the systems.
So you've got a continuously self-propagating family of plants that build the soil for you.
The difference between our tamale and the neighbors is very evident. Our neighbors, the lands are bare, or just one monocrop all the way. If it's dry season, it's just dry that way. But in our system, it's always green, always bushy. In Tamalu, we are living in a food forest.
Even if it's just a normal tomato, if you taste it, it's not just juicy, but it has some flavor. It doesn't really matter what it is. If you taste it, it's really yummy.
We've been harvesting very superior quality produce from the farm. We started with families, but now we are at the online shops. We've been selling to restaurants, also locally in Nanyuki and Nairobi. And we are also selling our farm produce to some shops in Mombasa too.
The end goal is to be able to consistently supply those big urban markets, because that's part of the circular vision of this farm.
As chefs, it's our duty to source our food from producers who are really looking after the environment. And I can tell you from a chef's point of view, this is where it starts. This is where you start building flavour. And more you'll see customers push back and actually demand that their food comes from responsible sources.
The future has got food and feed for everyone. We should not just think about ourselves. We are part of nature. We need to have a stable agricultural system in which we're able to store a lot of carbon in the soil to produce healthy food for human beings and other parts of the ecosystem, and therefore get on a path of growth that is based on the wider concept of circular economy.
Can farming like this feed the world? I firmly believe it can, if not it does. But you have to change the food system in order to be able to make the decisions you want to on farm. My grandfather moved here in the 50s and was part of this wave of industrialisation of agriculture, and his domain was pigs. He was part of that focus on ripping out hedgerows and putting stock inside. And my aunt ran it for 30 years until we moved back in 2007. The business we inherited was quite deeply entrenched in the kind of big food system. So we were producing commodities, wheat, barley, oilseed rape, and selling them on global markets, which have really nothing to do with how much it costs to produce a ton of wheat here in Somerset. Yeah, going to do that bag as well. The first 5 years we were entrenched in the industrial system. The middle 5 years we were really thinking about what was really going on. Why was there this yield plateau? My mindset shifted from still trying to be an industrial farmer by fixing soil fertility and by considering the soil biology, to then seeing what was really going on in the soil and realising that the two systems were just fundamentally incompatible. The process of transformation for me was just about lots and lots of simple, small decisions that all add up to, 15 years later, a farm that is totally different. And that also led us to start really thinking about what food system we were involved in as well. We have a 4-year rotation, 2 years of diverse lays running into 2 years of arable cropping. And half of the arable cropping goes to Southwest bakeries, including Rosie's Bakery on the farm, and the other half goes to feed the pigs, which are a really important part of the fertility part of the system. I wanted to start here by saying, how do I want to do this? And in the old system, I couldn't do that. You had to work back from a price that you didn't set, and therefore that pushed you down a completely different trajectory in terms of thinking about scale and yield and cost. It's a totally different existence, really, and identity as a farmer. But it really matters because, you know, when I was farming conventionally, we were constantly trying to impose ourselves and effectively beat nature. And now everything we're doing is kind of enhancing it or working with or feeling for the boundaries, and it's such a big difference from where we were 15 years ago. The point of regenerative is it's a mindset, it's an approach, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of being on the farm. So as soon as you codify it, you stop it being a living, like moving thing. The whole essence of what we're trying to achieve is a resilient farming system. So that doesn't mean boom yields or bust yields. It means accepting a stable, sustainable yield, whether it's the stock that's coming off the ground and the carrying capacity, or it's the yield of the wheat or the emmer or the cereals that are going into the bakeries. Okay. Imagine I carry some grain to Rosie's mill, she mills it, I take the bran from the mill and I feed it back to the pigs, and then she makes a sausage roll with the meat from the pigs and puts it in the pastry that's made from the grain. I mean, that's just like, that would never happen in an industrialized system.
We're giving people the opportunity to put something in their bodies that's nutritious and comes from somewhere, from a place where so much good intention has gone into making these choices around that end-baked good. We have this amazing opportunity to sort out problems between us and within our network. It's really empowering to do that rather than to think that someone else is going to solve the food system crisis. I'm giving feedback on varieties and what's functioning well and what's tasting really good in the bakery, and that informs what he grows.
The easiest way of communicating all of the stuff we're doing is to just remove that disconnect between what we're doing and who's eating it. So bring people to the farm and feed our local community. That's what small food brings. Is you don't have to package that up into like a neat, sexy one-liner. You can just let everyone consume the farm through their own lens, kind of thing. Uh-oh, what? It sort of doesn't matter, or it matters a lot less how many pounds per tonne the wheat is. We're like deeply embedded in this food system together. Is that touching? I'm not quite sure. Right, back to the tractor. Back to the tractor. And the interesting thing, coming full circle, is that we're now thinking about yield again, because the farm is like rewarding us with a really actually highly fertile, productive ecosystem. How do we prevent regenerative from becoming packaged up and codified and a minimum standard? You know, how do we enshrine it and keep it in our own hands and as a lived experience?
Oh, you've been a good girl, haven't you? What colour's this one?
Green. Right, let's get you done, Eric. If I think about the future, it's less about what hopes I have. Hope implies that we have some grand plan. We don't hope, and it's more about trusting what we're doing and let the farm set the future.
We really can't overstate the importance of rice. Over 1 billion people derive their livelihood from rice. It represents 20% of the caloric intake for the world's population. 1/4 to 1/3 of fresh water reserve is allocated to the growing of rice in flooded fields. And when water is flooding a field, it's creating microbes that are producing methane gas. 11 to 15% of man-made methane is a result of flooded rice fields. The economics for many smallholder farmers of rice is dire. Many of them are at the bottom of the pyramid and just can't make ends meet. Any conversation about a circular economy has to take into effect people in the field who are growing the food. Food will be a defining issue of the 21st century. The problem is onboarding another billion people on the planet. We need to grow more rice on less land.
We have to be very, very careful how we produce rice, because with the usage of pesticide, chemical fertilizers, water depletion, yield is declining. Our soil is dying.
The system of rice intensification is an agroecological way to grow rice that is regenerative in nature, getting bigger yields without proprietary seeds from multinational companies and the accompanying synthetic chemical fertilizers that go along with them. It's been adopted by about 25 million farmers. There's little changes in how rice is grown. SRI specifies younger seedling planted as a single seed in rows.
एक पेड़ लगाते हैं, पहले हम बहुत लगाते थे 10-12 पेड़। वो रासायनिक से उसमें दवाई डालते हैं, हम लोग नहीं डालते हैं। उनका खर्चा भी ज़्यादा है हमारा। उसमें टाइम की बचत इसलिए ना कि वो जब सिर्फ पद्धति से लगाते हैं ना तो जल्दी लग जाता है।
The plant gets more aeration, the root develops much better so that it can harvest more nutrients to give better yield.
The major difference with SRI and conventional rice growing is that the fields are not continuously flooded.
There is no anaerobic condition in the soil. There is no production of methane.
In communities that have transitioned to SRI, the soil is drastically improved because of the microbial activity.
Before we started regenerative cultivation, we have analyzed the soil. After 4 years, we see 50 to 70% increase in the carbon.
Farmers can use 90% less seed, 50% less water, double their yields, and produce much more income.
बाद में तो सर बारिश से ही हो जाता है, फिर नीचे का पानी लगाना पड़ता है ना फिर। सर टाइम तो सुबह जाते हैं, जैसे तो सुबह अपने घर का करके चले जाते हैं, भैंस का, गाय का, सब चीज़ का। खेत में जाते हैं, खेत से भी 2 घंटे पहले घर आ जाते हैं।
परिवर्तन हमारे परिवार में परिवर्तन ये है कि जब हमारा खर्चा कम हो रहा है तो हमें बचत भी हो रही है और हम अपने बच्चों को अच्छी जगह
Lotus Foods is a specialty rice company. We're really proud that we are keeping the biodiversity of rice alive with creating markets for heirloom rices. We're creating stable supply chain that can provide food to feed the increasing population. And we have to do it by putting the carbon into the soil, not into the atmosphere.
We have the fantastic farmers who understand the importance of SRI cultivation. At the same time, we have the Lotus Foods who are buying our rice to give the best quality products for the consumers around the world.
As a business, we have seen that these increased costs have paid off because consumers are understanding the benefits of regenerative agriculture. As Lotus Foods grew, we knew that to be successful in the marketplace, we needed to create value-added products. So these value-added products included a rice ramen, rice pad thai noodles, rice udon noodles. So we were the first company to take rice and make a rice-based ramen. Organic SRI is inherently regenerative. We're talking about animal welfare, community, and people health. The reason why we wanted to be one of the first companies to have a regenerative organic certified rice so that we could show the world how important it was to grow rice, this amazing crop that feeds half the world's population, without greenhouse gas emissions, without lots of water. Actually, it's good for business. That's the bottom line. Businesses are in the business of creating wealth, but it's not just wealth for themselves anymore. And that's where SRI comes in. It benefits the farmer, it benefits the land, it benefits the community, it benefits the consumer who eats this more nutritious rice. It's wealth for all stakeholders.
Any change that's for the better is valuable. Every meal is a potential solution towards a better food system.
I'm really fluffing this badly.
You need to get into your stride.
I do need to get into my stride.
A homodod is, depending where you are in Suffolk or Norfolk, it can mean a hedgehog, it can sometimes mean a snail. They're sort of round and curled up. So perhaps slightly fancifully, a bean or a pea is round and curls up in its pod. So there was a tenuous connection with the beans and peas that were our first products.
Before Nick, William and I founded Hobmedod, I was always very interested in ecology and the world around us, and the realisation that food really was this fulcrum, this central point. It's in all of our lives, it's what all of us do, and that by making choices about what we eat and how it's grown, we can really affect the world around us, both socially but also environmentally. This sense that there is this, what you could broadly call a global emergency, and you could put the climate into that, you could put biodiversity loss into that, you could put inequality of food distribution into that, you could put chronic ill health into that. And really that's what we're driven by. You know, how do we find answers to these complex problems? How do we find a systems approach that will allow us to make a positive shift through diet and land use? And beans and peas are just at the heart of that. What we're going to have a look at today is to see whether the beans are doing that incredible thing of fixing nitrogen. So they work with a soil-borne bacteria called rhizobia. It's really difficult to get into it. The land we're on now is a clay soil, but for 60 or 70 years, they will have been farmed in quite a kind of oppressive way. The plant produces a nodule that surrounds that cluster of bacteria, and then the rhizobia take atmospheric nitrogen out of the air, turn it into nitrates that the plant can access. Can you see the red there? That is leg hemoglobin. So it's essentially the same as the hemoglobin that transports oxygen around our body to allow it to make use of the nitrogen. It's a really incredible, complicated process. So as well as feeding itself,
this bean can potentially be feeding other crops in the field. So if we were to drill wheat into this bean crop, the wheat would grow better and need less nitrogen because the bean would be feeding it. 5%, roughly speaking, of all man-made climate emissions come from the production of nitrogen. So if we can avoid it by using plants like these beans, then that's absolutely fantastic.
One thing we need to see a lot more of across the board is diversity. And that's both diversity of the crops that are grown, but also the approaches which need to be adapted to suit local conditions. What we do is we try to work directly with the farmers to agree a price that works for them to farm viably and in the right way.
Maple Farm is a 137-hectare organic farm situated near the Suffolk coast. He started working with Hobbit several years ago, and it's a relationship that works very well. What they're attempting to do by encouraging local farms to grow pulses, grow more pulses, because we don't grow enough in the UK. We very much try and practice a closed-loop system here within the farm, so that the only product that goes off the farm is in its finished retail packaging. Everything's incorporated back into the land.
What agroforestry is attempting to do is to create that edge effect, which in ecology is the most productive area. And by creating rows of trees with crops in between, you're essentially creating a woodland edge repeatedly where there's high nutrient levels, high biodiversity, and high productivity.
In this section, the first section we planted, there's 7 different species of trees in here.
Benefits are legion, really. There's nutrient cycling, there's bringing nutrients up from lower down to the point where the roots of the annual crops can't reach, and then distributing that on the surface in the autumn as the leaves fall down. There's moisture retention, although it might seem as if the trees are drawing moisture out of the ground. Actually, they're helping to retain moisture in the soil.
When we set this up, I thought it'd be years before we see a difference, and it wasn't. The amazing thing was that it was the first year. Just leaving the grass strips, the beetles come along. By trying to balance the system, we can move these nutrients around the farm and let the minimum amount of nutrients off the farm. We need to take as much carbon out of the system as possible. This is a perfect bird for us. I was really quite shocked to find that in order to make our hen food, we were using soya beans that were imported from China. And I thought, how can it be that we're having to bring these beans halfway across the world in order to feed our hens? And we tried all sorts of approaches. And about 15 months ago, somebody suggested to me, why not try keeping mealworms, raising mealworms, with the view to using them as an alternative to soya, because they're a high-protein food source. And being insects, and chickens want to eat insects, they're just a kind of perfect match, really. The beauty of the system is we've got the flour mill next door, and when we produce in flour, that also produces bran. And the bran is the perfect medium and food for the mealworms. So we put bran in the trays, along with also some of the pea flour that comes from hoppadods. The frass powder, which is their waste product, that's kept, and that is a fantastic fertiliser. Most conventional farms, they'll use ammonium nitrate fertiliser or other synthetic fertilisers, which is basically converting fossil fuel in the form of gas into a nutrient and replacing the nutrients like that. So really all you're doing is farming fossil fuels. That's unsustainable in the long term.
All farmers are competing with each other to achieve the highest yields in order to achieve a return that reflects their cost of production and makes them a living. If we can detach yield from the work of the farmer, then we can radically change the system. In fact, there are lots of different ways to feed the world that aren't just about yield.
Not about reducing what we pay farmers for what they produce. It's removing the incentive to maximise yields at all costs.
By making a lot of noise and demonstrating that change is possible, we can inspire farmers and other businesses in order to make changes to the way that they're working as well. We are not the change. We are simply a catalyst and an enabler for change, I hope.
Circular design for food is about creating food products in a way that helps nature thrive. In Brazil, some organizations have found a way of entering the rainforest and bringing out the best of its diversity. They create unique products using diverse ingredients while keeping the trees standing and preserving the forest.
Conectar os povos da floresta com a cidade através de mercados éticos e diferenciados é fundamental para que a gente possa promover sistemas alimentares positivos.
A gente gosta muito de falar que para soluções de problemas complexos a gente precisa realmente de soluções em rede, soluções em cadeia.
Um risoto com 15 espécies de cogumelos, ainda cultivados por povos indígenas, vai ser incrível.
Qual é esse novo modelo de relação comercial na Amazônia para os produtos da sociobiodiversidade?
A nossa atuação na floresta e a busca por novos ingredientes faz realmente com que a empresa olhe para um cenário em que a cadeia alimentar tem um papel muito positivo para a natureza.
A Rede Origens Brasil, ela surge de um desafio grande que a gente tinha na Amazônia, ali na região do Xingu, quando um corredor de áreas protegidas onde viviam populações tradicionais e povos indígenas foram criadas. Naquele momento, aquelas populações estavam sofrendo pressão por atividades econômicas que levavam à degradação ou à ilegalidade, como o garimpo, a pecuária, o próprio desmatamento. Então a ideia era que a gente pudesse pensar alguma solução que pudesse valorizar a produção tradicional praticada por essas populações ao longo de gerações, criar mercados diferenciados, éticos e que ao mesmo tempo pudesse gerar uma alternativa econômica que pudesse ajudá-los a manter a floresta em pé. O papel do Origens Brasil é fazer essa intermediação entre a ponta. A gente identifica a oferta, identifica a demanda das empresas e a gente tenta fazer um match. Então nós estamos em 56 milhões de hectares, atuamos em 33 áreas protegidas, com mais de 2.800 produtores de 63 etnias falantes de mais de 40 línguas. São 71 organizações comunitárias, indígenas e instituições de apoio, trabalhando junto com 35 empresas para criar essa nova economia da floresta em pé.
Em 2010, nós lançamos um pão chamado Castanha do Pará e Quinoa, que acabou se tornando um dos pães especiais mais vendidos do Brasil. E, consequentemente, a gente acabou virando um grande comprador de castanhas. Em 2016, o Imaflora nos abordou, contando um pouquinho da ideia da Rede Origens, e desde 2016 nós já compramos 865 toneladas das regiões protegidas, das regiões que fazem parte da Rede Origens Brasil.
Comprar ingredientes de vários biomas brasileiros faz parte da nossa estratégia. Então, quando a Mãe Terra está ali escolhendo um produtor que está favorecendo o ingrediente da biodiversidade brasileira, a gente sabe que aquilo é muito mais forte, que isso tem um impacto muito maior. O rito com cogumelo Yanomami é um arroz especial para risoto, que ele tem, além de ter vários grãos, tem painço, tem chia, tem várias coisas que deixam ele mais nutritivo. Ele tem o que é mais especial, que são 15 espécies de cogumelo Yanomami. A gente teve uma grande indicação do Alex Atala. Ele é assim, um parceiro já da marca da gente trocar, ter muita coisa em comum. Então ele chamou Mãe Terra lá para o restaurante dele e falou assim: Mãe Terra, vocês precisam trabalhar com esse cogumelo aqui. E daí começa uma parceria da gente conhecer o ISA, conhecer o Origens Brasil e realmente desenvolver esse produto.
A gente trouxe não só os produtores e as empresas, mas nós trouxemos também as organizações comunitárias, cooperativas, associações e as instituições de apoio técnico, organizações geralmente não governamentais que apoiam apoiam essas populações na estruturação dessas cadeias.
O Instituto Socioambiental Imaflora, o Origens Brasil, foi crucial para a gente aprender todas as expectativas que os Yanomamis tinham para com quais as indústrias, as marcas que eles queriam trabalhar e da gente realmente aprender a como se trabalhar com os povos originários. A gente tem um acordo específico onde a gente já se comprometeu com a compra do cogumelo por 2 anos para que a gente pudesse estabelecer esse compromisso com as comunidades e que não fosse alguma coisa pontual, porque é realmente um trabalho que a Mãe Terra acredita muito. A escala muitas vezes é muito complicada, porque a gente precisa de um volume maior para a gente conseguir trabalhar, lançar um produto, para a gente não ter ruptura nem nada. Então teve um caso, por exemplo, como as nossas batatas orgânicas. A gente queria entrar no mercado de chips, só que não tinha batata orgânica. A gente contratou um agrônomo para poder fazer um trabalho de desenvolvimento junto com o produtor, para que a gente conseguisse chegar no volume na escala que a gente precisava.
Já foram vários anos de aprendizado, a gente tem uma evolução muito grande na qualidade dos produtos. Tanto eu quanto o nosso time aqui visitou a Amazônia diversas vezes e os extrativistas também visitaram a nossa fábrica diversas vezes. E isso fez com que eles conseguissem entender qual que era ali o perfil de produto final que a gente teria. Ao mesmo tempo em que a gente entendeu todas as complexidades que existiam ali no meio da floresta para a extração das castanhas.
Quando a gente aproximou a Wikibold, a gente percebeu que seria um desafio a gente conseguir organizar e ofertar o volume que a empresa precisava. Então, uma estratégia que a gente encontrou foi diversificar a fonte de produtores. Então, a Wikibold não compra de uma comunidade, ela compra de um coletivo de comunidades.
Esse volume ele já variou muito dentro da companhia em relação à quantidade das castanhas que são provenientes da rede, No começo, lá em 2016, eram 2% do total de castanhas e nós já chegamos há anos aí com 30% do total de castanhas.
Então, eu acho que essas soluções que precisam e podem ser prototipadas dentro da rede. A gente desenvolveu uma plataforma em que todos os dados de produção, de quem são os produtores, em que territórios eles vivem, como eles fazem essa coleta, o manejo desse produto, elas vão para essa plataforma, permitindo depois que as empresas consigam fazer a rastreabilidade dessa produção. Por onde ela passou, quais foram os beneficiários, como que essa produção chegou da ponta até a empresa.
Tem 2 pontos muito importantes para a utilização de produtos da biodiversidade brasileira. O primeiro é a potência nutricional. A castanha é um produto muito rico em selênio, então tem uma fonte de diversas vitaminas, e isso é importante para quem consome nosso produto. O segundo ponto, que é muito relevante, é que ao comprar as castanhas da floresta e pagar uma renda justa para esses extrativistas, a gente incentiva a permanência dos mesmos no meio da floresta. E quando eles permanecem na floresta, eles acabam inibindo a ação de madeireiros, de grileiros ilegais e acabam fazendo aí com que a gente consiga manter a floresta em pé.
A gente sabe a importância que tem o pequeno produtor dentro de toda a indústria dos alimentos. Poder trabalhar um pouco mais próximo das comunidades indígenas foi de grande valor para a gente, porque hoje a população indígena ela representa 5% da população, mas eles são guardiões de mais de 80% da biodiversidade do mundo.
A forma com que esses povos tradicionalmente já fazem o uso dos seus territórios, o manejo dos seus produtos, é uma forma que a gente precisa reconhecer. A gente não precisa vir com normas globais para avaliar e para dizer que eles estão conservando a floresta. A gente precisa de partir de um sistema que já reconheça esse importante papel desses povos como guardião da floresta em pé.
A gente já vê um movimento muito forte das instituições financeiras oferecendo créditos mais baratos para empresas que tenham boas práticas ambientais, sociais e de governança. Se os empresários não entenderem que sim tem um papel social, que se movimentem por inteligência, porque os negócios eles vão pedir essa mudança radical nos próximos anos.
Socioambiental se escreve junto porque você não faz um alimento sem pensar em quem está produzindo ou quem vai consumir, sem pensar no impacto que aquilo vai ter para o meio ambiente.
As parcerias comerciais diferenciadas entre empresas e comunidade, ou seja, esses novos modelos de negócio que mantêm a floresta em pé, ela é chave para a distribuição de renda, combater a fome e a desigualdade e para que a gente tenha uma economia mais descarbonizada e que consiga responder às mudanças climáticas. E ela é chave para a gente reconhecer esse passivo histórico, né, do papel importantíssimo desses povos para a manutenção desse saber e da floresta em pé.
First and foremost, we source for flavour. There's been a considerable degradation in the value that people place against food, and we believe that by sourcing through flavour, we have a trickle-down effect on how food is grown, and we can fulfil our overarching mission that is essentially to revolutionise the food system. Flavour, when it's at its peak, is a sign of a vegetable or a fruit or a product that has essentially been grown in a responsible fashion. It's been grown seasonally, in the correct climate, under the correct conditions, and by masters of their arts, farmers and growers who care about stewarding the soil and growing in the correct practices, growing for flavour, not yield and not profit. Originally, DNA, fruit and vegetables, but we quickly realised that our mission doesn't just extend to fresh fruit and vegetables and things like grains or manufactured products or sauces or juices or dips or soups. Also, all food feed into this food system, and it's important to kind of bring those into the conversation as well. So we work with over 400 growers and farmers and growing in a collaborative fashion to kind of bring these products in. Since the 1950s and when supermarkets really became a thing, there's been a huge growth in industrial mass agriculture, where the focus is on consistency of size, monocultures grown all year round, no crop rotation, little or no care taken for the soil. And what we've ended up with is, perhaps a cheaper, less flavourful product, but also a product that's less nutritionally dense. So in removing the care and the love that's gone into growing it and taking too much out of the soil without putting anything back in, we've lost a lot of that nutritional density. We look at developing products that both fulfill that need and fill that gap, if you like, but also stay true to our brand values of seasonality, flavour and traceability. And the range is designed in a way that we try and toe the line between familiarity with an average consumer, but also discovery and kind of pushing the envelope a little bit in terms of trying something new. So as an example, if you look at top-selling dips in the UK, everyone's favourite hummus is at the top, but not far behind that is tzatziki. So we've kind of given our twist and brought in an enigmatic kind of British twist to it by using kind of peppery watercress in there to bring something that is familiar by name, but perhaps gives a beautiful product that grows very well in the UK, opens a lot of consumers' eyes to that. We recognise quite early on that we have to work within the food system in order to change it to a certain degree, and big retailers and the food system in general likes to have a consistent product on the shelf throughout the year. It plays into consumer habits, consumer behaviours. Another fantastic example would be our tomato soup. It's a staple, best-selling soup in the UK, not ours, but as a category, yet, should I say. So in the summer months, we buy fantastic Datterini tomatoes from a grower called Tuccio, who we've worked with for a number of years. We even have a meeting room in our office named after him. And those are fantastic. They taste great. We roast them up and we make a soup with Umbrian and Coco Bianco beans with that. When the weather gets colder, there are actually varieties of and cultivars of tomatoes that thrive as the weather cools. And we launch, I guess you could call it, we now sell a range of tomatoes in the winter under the umbrella winter tomatoes. So we shift our supply chain, we flex our supply chain, and we use a black Iberico tomato from Almeria in Spain. So the consumer is still getting a tomato soup throughout the year, but we're celebrating the biodiversity that's out there. We're supporting multiple growers so that their art and their craft does not die out. And all in all, it's a win-win for everybody. The term winter tomato, for instance, is now being used by Nigel Slater. It's being used by the River Cafe. It's widely used now within food literature and journalism. And this is not something that existed before we started bringing over these amazing winter tomatoes. On the consistency of supply side, I think it comes back to the relationships that we've built and also our forecasting and giving the growers and farmers the confidence that if they grow this crop for us and out on a limb, we're going to take it. And if they have flooding or if they have abnormally high temperatures and they only get half the crop that they thought they were going to get, we will pay them a higher price for it so that they can still survive and their art and their trade and their family and their business can thrive and continue to thrive. It's in part the way that we design products is what we've learned from working with these retailers. So if we were making products for purely our stores, it may be that we weren't pushed to innovate in the way that we have and find solutions to work within this system. Our price point is on the premium end. And yes, the location that we're filming in is one of the more wealthy areas of London. I do believe that scaling and showing that what we do is possible in the hope that other businesses adopt it is the only way that prices are going to come down.